Lee and Micaiah and see. My vision is such that I can either get a good look at the screen in front of me, my computer, or the screen above. So I have to kind of adjust my trifocals back and forth. So bear with me. If you're large on the screen in front of me, I can see you just fine. If you're small, then I'm going to be squinting up there. But welcome, and I'm sorry you couldn't join us in person. We're really pleased to be in this new beautiful facility, and the staff have just been terrific in getting us started this morning. I want to just say that we have a lot to celebrate, not only just being here in this space, but we are in a moment of opportunity with the Future Ready Oregon dollars. Some of us attended the Talent Summit on Tuesday, very exciting, upbeat conversations there. We also had a new tribal student support program to learn about today. For me, that's particularly exciting, coming to fruition of something that we've been working on for a few years now, trying to get in place. Today we're going to have invited testimony from representatives from Van Ron, talking with us about their program, and we've convened a panel of Indigenous learners to talk about what the approaches that we need to take in order to attract more Indigenous people into higher education. And I'll have a lot more to say about that because I get to introduce them. We have a really long agenda, so I'm going to be brief here. Several consent items, our routine reports, and other routine items that we have, our invited guests, and very important discussion from the committee yesterday, finance and accessibility, the community college funding formula yesterday, and the increased criteria. I want to take a moment. Please mute your. Thank you. Also, then there we go. And I want to take a minute to welcome our new commissioners, and they're here with us today. Richard Devlin, Motu Sapelli, did I say that correctly? Thank you. And Aslan Matthias. Did I get it right?
No.
No.
It's Aslan.
Aslan, okay. Nice. So welcome. If you would, could you each take a few minutes and just tell us a little bit about yourselves? And
Well, thank you very much for having me. My name is Aslan Matthias. I've been working in higher ed as a staff member for just over a decade now. I think I stopped actually counting how many years. I have a really, I'm sorry, there's a bit of nerves, right, in being new, but I have such a passion for kind of looking at bigger picture, looking at policy, looking at ways in which education can become a universal human right, and obviously social as well. So the opportunity to be a part of this is just something that I'm still wrapping my head around, and I'm completely grateful and appreciative that I get to be in a room with everyone else and learn and affect our higher education in a way that hopefully yields the best outcomes for all Oregonians. In my spare time, aside from work, I spend a lot of time on the river paddling. My passion is definitely to be on the water, and also working in my little community garden plot. I wish I could tell you something else about me. Those questions will have to come.
Hi everyone, my name is Motu Sapelli, pronouns he and him. I'm a graduate student. I'm still relatively new to the higher education in the realm of the Oregon legislature. But after reading everyone's bios, I'm impressed and I aspire to be each and every one of you, maybe like a little bit of each and every one of you. For the most part, it's an honor and privilege to be here. Granted, I do acknowledge that I wasn't born in Oregon, but I feel like I'm an Oregonian at heart because I chose to come to Oregon to get my education, but I plan on staying here for the most part, or for the rest of my life. I had the opportunity of serving as the first Asian Pacific Islander student body president for PSU last year, and then through that work, I did a lot of advocacy work. But of all the different organizations I had to testify or work with, the HECC was the most impressive, and so that's the reason why I was really happy that I applied and eventually got nominated to be here. And so it's going to be a privilege to work with all of you, to learn from y'all, and so this is the first time I've joined something like this, and so I ask with grace to please bear with me as I learn these new steps and stuff, but I am happy to be here. Aside from that, I'm a current graduate student at OHSU, and then on my free time, I love plants. If any of you want plants or any tips on stairs specifically, I have like 16 at home, or maybe 50, but we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that.
I'm having a bit of difficulty adjusting to the environment. I've been prior to this an elected official at the local state level for 31 years, 21 years in the legislature, and the last 7 years in the co-chairs. And the governor was good enough to appoint Northwest Park Conservation Council for the last 4 years. Last 2 years as chair, and though that I wouldn't go completely crazy, she appointed this commission. So I still have meetings to go to and things to do. I have always had an interest in education, particularly higher education. I am the first in my family of 9 to graduate from college, fortunately, and there's now a second. My younger sister went back to school in her 40s and got her undergraduate degree. I am a product of Oregon higher education system, having graduated this year and having attended. So I look forward to my next 4 years here, and I'm hoping that it is in my final 4 years.
Well, thank you so much, all of you. Mostly like you, I came to Oregon to go to graduate school, and being here much longer than I expected originally, and Mike, like Senator Devlin, I also am not any good at being retired, so that's admired in my culture. So I feel like it is a good fit for me. So welcome, and we very much appreciate the knowledge that you bring, particularly the technical expertise with regard to the way things are financed and the history that you bring to the knowledge of even the creation of the commission. So welcome and thank you. And we are broadening our perspective and the number of voters on the commission, so new horizons and at a good time. And one of the things I was saying, I think to Mota before we began today, how much I appreciate that this commission stands as representing the interests of all of the residents of Oregon. That we come from diverse higher education backgrounds and community, and that we weigh and moderate and mediate the interests of all of the stakeholder groups who come to the table and attempt to make sure that policy statewide meets the interests, not only meets the interests, but advances the interests of all of those stakeholders. And so I'm pleased to have you be with us, new commissioners and existing commissioners, and also my hat's always off to Ben for assembling a team of people in this agency that are extraordinary. It's great to be able to accomplish what we accomplished. And I know you've got a steep climb ahead of you with the Future Ready Oregon opportunities that we had, and some of the new scholarship items. These are fantastic opportunities, and I know you're up to the task. So thank you all. I think with that, I will, we need to, our first action item today is to approve the minutes from the February meeting. Roll call. Oh, that's right. We need a roll call. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair Cross?
Here.
Vice Chair Rowe?
Here.
Commissioner Adams?
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Erzkowski? Thank you. Commissioner Becker? Here. Commissioner Devlin?
Here.
Commissioner Edwards? I think she may be running late today. Commissioner Ricardo?
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Gillard?
Here.
Commissioner Hayden?
Here.
Commissioner Lujan Valerio?
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Matias?
Natia.
Matias. Thank you. Commissioner Stipoli?
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Valdivinos Torres? Thank you.
We're good?
We're good. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Well, with that, I will, is there a motion to approve the minutes of the February 10th meeting?
So moved.
Been moved and seconded. Any comment, any discussion on the motion? All of those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed?
Aye.
And any abstentions? Motion carries. We've done it. Next item on our agenda is a report from Director Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just a couple of notes about the hybrid meeting before I get into my remarks. So I think, first of all, this is a new challenge. We got very good at our fully remote meetings. They worked pretty well, and we were really good at having in-person meetings prior to that. Now we're going to get good at having hybrid meetings, but I'm sure there will be some kinks, so bear with us through that. I think one of the challenges with the room setup, which is overall, I think, pretty good, but one of the challenges is audio for folks who are listening online. I think this microphone is both sensitive to things that are in the immediate vicinity, rustling of papers, but also sort of reverberates with the large space. So it's not we don't have a highly sophisticated audio system here yet. For folks online who are participating, if you are having trouble hearing speakers, maybe put a note in the chat. I'm monitoring the chat. We don't ordinarily use the chat for public meetings, but that would be probably an appropriate use, just to sort of indicate in the chat, hey, having some trouble hearing the speaker in the room, and we'll do our best to modify the setup or have the speaker raise their voice so that you can hear more clearly. And I will also be monitoring the online participants for raised hands and indicating to Chair Cross when there's a hand raised from a commissioner who's participating online. So we'll try it out, and I'm sure we'll get better even over the course of today, but we haven't done much of this yet. This is really a really exciting day. So these are new offices to the HECC. We moved our agency from the public service building in Salem and a leased space in Eugene, where the Office of Student Access and Completion had been for many years, to this building in May and June of 2020. But that was during the initial months of the pandemic, and we have not opened this building to members of the public, and we've had very few staff even working in this building since that time. So today is just the first public meeting, the first commission meeting that we've held in this glorious space since our move almost 2 years ago, and it's long anticipated. The staff of the HECC who have been setting this building up for today and supporting in this meeting preparation and then execution today have done remarkable work. And you'll see just there the care that they've taken in the preparation of this building for you and for, of course, our returning staff throughout the day. And hopefully we'll get a chance to show you around this space. Just by way of a little bit of history, this was the former headquarters of NORPAC, the food processing company. The space became available when NORPAC went out of business. A couple of years ago, we happened to be on the market at the time for new office space in order to consolidate our Eugene and Salem staff, and because at the time the Oregon Department of Education was looking for more staff in the public service, more space in the public service building, and so they wanted our space and they helped support our move costs to here and made it a good deal for us to move to this space. So we're really excited to have it and hope that this will be the first of many, many meetings that are here in this space and get a lot of good work done. I want to echo the chair's sort of excitement and appreciation about the legislative session that's just concluded. We'll hear from Kyle and others throughout the day in more detail about some of the items that are coming before the commission as a result of action that the legislature took in February and March of this year. The launch of our Future Ready Oregon investments, which we celebrated and explained and gained feedback on at the Talent Summit in Portland earlier this week. The launch of a new tribal student grant program that you'll see rules on and hopefully adopt rules on later today. The expansion of the Oregon Promise and a more generous Oregon Promise program. There was some really significant legislative action, and it will engage and involve the commission in moving that work forward. So we're really, it really is an exciting time for the HECC and for Oregon higher education. I mentioned the Talent Summit. Our staff, there were several hundred people there, including some commissioners. Appreciate Chair Cross and other members of the commission who participated in that event, along with a few hundred guests and some terrific national speakers and local speakers, really trying to harness the energy about meeting Oregon's workforce challenges, including skilled workforce shortages, with an equity focus. So connecting underrepresented Oregon populations with careers that are meaningful and through education and training. So that's it's just a real honor and responsibility for this agency to take the lead in moving that forward. More generally, these are, I think we shouldn't be shy about also acknowledging the challenges that face Oregon post-secondary education and training, in spite of the unprecedented investments in Future Ready Oregon and the expansion of some scholarship funding that we'll talk about in greater detail today. These remain pretty difficult times. One of the most obvious, and I think for this commission, concerning pieces of evidence for that are the continuing enrollment declines at our public colleges and universities. Not every one of them, to be clear, and those enrollment declines are particularly concentrated at the community college sector and then unevenly amongst community colleges. But there are many Oregonians who, during normal times, we can remember those we would have expected to be engaged in post-secondary education and training, who are not today. And the reasons for that include probably the fact that there are a lot of jobs and opportunity outside of the education and training, but the challenge that enrollment decline creates for achieving our goals, this commission and state's goals for expanded post-secondary education completion in Oregon, as well as the challenge that it creates for institutions that are seeing some really pretty extraordinary declines in revenue associated with those disenrollment or non-enrollment is going to be, I think, a big issue for this commission to understand and wrestle with in the months and potentially years to come. A little bit of, I don't know about silver lining, but a little bit of some of the positive indicators that we see. As you know, through our Office of Student Access and Completion, we administer public grant programs that the state funds, including the Oregon Opportunity Grant and the Oregon Promise. the Oregon Promise, that relatively smaller program that benefits, that is available to recent high school graduates or GED completers who are attending community college, we've seen a pretty significant boost in applications for participants in the fall of 2022. We're up about 36% over our applications at this time last year, due partly to work on our office's part to better outreach to those about to be high school or GED completers. Still, to be clear, that increase of 36% still doesn't bring us quite back to pre-pandemic levels. Last year was just really an aberration, the major decline in the number of high school or GED completers who were applying for the promise. Nevertheless, the legislature's expansion, and you'll see the rule on this later in your agenda, the legislature's expansion of that grant program, or the greater award size that we're allowed to commit, particularly to low-income students, is we hope will help also drive participation in post-secondary education with that expanded funding for the Oregon Promise. Likewise, and you will not see a rule on this, but it's an important policy change that the commission staff at OSAC is empowered to make. And I want to note here, involves growing the eligible population for the Oregon Opportunity Grant. So again, we don't require rules changes for this, but at a staff level, using our existing Oregon Opportunity Grant budget, we are ramping up, we're expanding eligibility up the income ladder. So the Oregon Opportunity Grant is focused on lowest income students, but if our budget permits, we can expand that definition of low income, and we're moving that for the fall of 2022 applicants. We're moving that up to students with as high as $8,000 expected family contributions. This is very wonky, this is financial aid language, but that gets into some middle class students who will receive benefits from the Oregon Opportunity Grant. We're also growing the size of that award somewhat, again, within existing state resources and within the existing budget for this program. So enrollment declines, but some expanded financial aid opportunities for enrolling students from the state, from the HECC, and we're hopeful that that can help to support and expand the number of Oregonians who are participating in post-secondary education and training. I just wanted to sort of a couple of other notes before we move on with the rest of the agenda. I wanted to acknowledge our new Director of Operations. He's sitting right behind Aislinn there, Tom Reel. Yes, welcome, Tom. Not welcome to the HECC. Tom's been our Director of our procurement, designated procurement office, or our procurement lead at the HECC for several years, done a terrific job in that role, and was recently promoted to be our Director of Operations. This is in connection, for some of you who have been with the Commission a while, this was in connection with giving Ramona Rodemaker full responsibility as my Deputy Executive Director for the agency, and being able to hire a Director of Operations behind her. She was for several years trying to do both jobs and doing them very well, but it was a big stretch. So we're better staffed in that regard than we have been. There have been a number of other hires at the agency. I won't go through the list, but we are growing. We are also, like many organizations, we are experiencing hiring challenges. This is a tough time, and for some positions, that's a really hard time to find highly qualified applicants. So I won't go into the details, but know that we are also, like you read about or you're experiencing through other organizations, we are having some struggles. We've been really fortunate in the, I think, very high rates of retention of employees, but we are also challenged in filling some key positions in the agency, and that will undoubtedly have some impact on our work. But we're doing the best we can. Finally, just a couple of today's agenda doesn't have, in some ways, as many items or topics as some of your prior commission meetings, maybe as typical, but it has some really important ones. And members of the Funding and Achievement Committee yesterday began serious discussion of the development of our agency request budget. You'll hear a report on that and gave some additional commission members in that today. Likewise, commissioners, yesterday at the subcommittee meeting also considered and made a recommendation to the full commission on the adoption of criteria for the approval or disapproval of any university tuition increase for resident students greater than 5%. And this is a really critical responsibility for the HECC. So important, those are a couple of the important items on today's agenda, in addition to the launch of our Oregon Student Travel Grant and the expansion of the Oregon Promise that you'll deal with through rules. So really appreciate the great attendance that we have today, both here and online. I wish we were seeing you online folks in the room, but hopefully we'll soon. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'll complete my remarks.
Thank you, Ben, and you're right on the button time-wise. And I see that Lindsay Ketz has joined us from the governor's office, so we're going to turn it over to him for the governor's report.
Good morning, Chair Cross, Vice Chair Rowe, and members of the commission, including new members. It's good to see each of you in whichever dimension you are joining today. It's all good to be together. I'm particularly honored today to speak with you all on Governor Brown's behalf. Today marks a historic moment for the commission, for Oregon as a state, and as a diverse and interconnected community. When you take up consideration of emergency rules later this morning or this afternoon to establish the Oregon Tribal Student Grant Program, you will really be commencing a remarkable step forward that will profoundly impact the future of Oregon's tribal students and our dynamic tribal communities. And through your actions, make Oregon, frankly, a model for the nation. Throughout her career, Governor Brown has been committed to strengthening the relationship between the state and Oregon's sovereign nations. The governor and tribal leaders alike recognize that a steadfast commitment to cooperation and consultation is of mutual benefit. And the governor understands to her core the moral necessity of being in right relationship with our tribes, to heal longstanding wounds, to bring our resources and assets together, to promote the resilience of our tribal communities, and to sustain the culture and identity of all our tribal people. This commitment to cooperation and consultation is also at the heart of our work around equity, and in her view, extends to all historically marginalized communities. It is the foundation of a just and more equitable Oregon. Our state's relationship with Oregon's tribes has come a long way, but there is a long road ahead to right historic wrongs committed against people who have called this place we call Oregon, they've called it home for millennia. In the governor's view, one way Oregon can take a meaningful step towards righting historic wrongs is through acts of reparation. In carrying forward today's rulemaking process to establish the Oregon Tribal Student Grant Program, the Commission is indeed taking a first step in carrying forward a reparative and restorative act, covering the full cost of attendance for any enrolled tribal member who has hopes of attending a community college or university in Oregon will be transformational. Transformational not just for students, as the governor has heard from the tribes directly, transformational for the future of each tribal nation. This program has been constructed in consultation with the 9 federally recognized tribes through the governor's office, the governor's or the government to government education cluster, with the very strong leadership of the Higher Education Coordinating Commission and the Office of Student Access and Completion. And we want to thank the HECC team for their work. The governor also applauds the legislature and Representative Tana Sanchez in particular for taking the abundance of one-time funds to make meaningful investment in higher education, putting our money where our values are to improve the lives of Oregon's tribal students. These students who for too long have not been properly served by or had access to our institutions of higher learning. Students identifying as American Indian Alaska Native have persistently accounted for just 1% of enrolled students at Oregon's community colleges and public universities. They deserve the opportunity post-secondary education provides, and we can, and through your actions today, we will do better. With the legislature's investment, Oregon is stepping up to make sure students can pursue and complete a 2-year or 4-year degree at no cost. The Oregon Tribal Student Grant will provide to enrolled members of Oregon's federally recognized tribes, estimated at over 700 students for the 2022-23 academic year, with grants based on a cost of attendance calculation that includes, but is not limited to, tuition and fees, housing, transportation, these and other costs that are too often barriers to enrollment and completion. This new opportunity for tribal students, as you all on the commission are aware, is not permanent. The rules you consider today establish a program to implement a one-time legislative appropriation. It is Governor Brown's expectation that the commission will develop and consider legislation for the 2023 legislative session that creates a sustainable, continuous program into perpetuity based on this same cost of attendance grant model. And to do so in continuous consultation with Oregon's federally recognized tribes, the governor, and the Legislative Commission on Indian Services. It was Chief Joseph who said, "Good words do not last long until they amount to something." These are words we too often hear repeated across Oregon's tribal and Native communities, and too often across BIPOC communities as well. The Commission is moving forward today to live into its equity mission through your direct action. This is one of many steps the governor stands with you on to advance a bold, inclusive, and transformational vision for higher education in Oregon. Transformation that your roadmap lays forward. So the governor thanks each of you for your time and consideration later today of the emergency rules put forward by Director Kane and the HECC team. It is not often that one gets to be a part of history or being a part of profound change. That is what is before you today, and Governor Brown strongly urges the Commission to move swiftly to adopt these rules. Chair Cross, that's the end of my report.
Well, thank you so much. Appreciate your coming today. Please communicate our gratitude to the governor for this new program, fulfilling the goal that this commission has had for many years as well. So we really appreciate you coming and telling us more about this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Cross. Thanks, everyone.
We're going to move next to invited testimony from Grand Ronde. And before we do that, and we still have Lindsay on for a moment at least, one of the things I just want to share personally about this particular item that Lindsay's reported on is that I wouldn't be sitting here today if it hadn't been for a grant program from my own tribe. I'm a citizen of the Seneca Nation of Indians. When I was just a boy, our reservation, a third of our reservation was flooded by the Kinzig Dam. And my family lost 300 acres of prime farmland that we received pennies on the acre for. Part of the settlement with the nation, the federal government, was a establishment of an educational foundation that guaranteed education for one generation of Senecas, and I happened to fall in the right spot. So I was the only person in my family to be able to go to college. And then as a result of that, I became a social worker and working in public child welfare in Mercer County, Pennsylvania, a mentor supervisor that wanted me to go to graduate school. And I said, there's no way that I can go to graduate school, can't afford it. But then she went and found money. There was a federal grant program out of the National Institutes of Mental Health They paid for my transportation to Portland from Western Pennsylvania. They paid for a stipend for living, food allowance in addition to my books and tuition and fees so that I could get my master's degree in social work. I can't tell you how important all of that support is to be able to overcome barriers for people who are not ever even going to consider that it's possible to do what can be done with the kinds of support that the legislation and the efforts of the governor have made possible here in Oregon. And to be part of that and to be sitting in the chair that I'm sitting in right at the moment is a pretty phenomenal feeling. I just wanted to share that personal journey with you because it is the beginning now of a journey for many, many people. So thank you. So we're gonna, is Angela with us? Are we ready for the public testimony? We're running a little bit early. So.
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay, I'll turn my camera. Hopefully both work at the same time.
Well, I want to introduce our speaker this morning from Grand Run for invited testimony, Angela Fasana. And Angela, I understand you also have somebody else with you this morning.
I do. I have my coworker, Melissa Polinek, is also with me this morning.
Great. So thank you for being here. And please take it away.
Thank you. It's great to see you, Chair. I actually did child welfare work before education, so our paths have crossed, although at distant wise, but it's funny to find us both here in the education realm this morning. So good morning. I am Angela Fasana. I am a citizen of the tribal nation for the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, and I currently serve as our education department manager. I come to you this morning to provide testimony as it relates to Focus Area 1 of your roadmap. And the intent of my testimony is to encourage a statewide recruitment and retention effort for Native American students to attend Oregon schools and universities. I am a graduate of Oregon schools, both Portland State University for my undergraduate degree and Northwestern School of Law at Lewis and Clark for my graduate degree. And I strongly support our students attending Oregon schools. However, my experience as a parent has me concerned about recruitment efforts in the state. Both of my children graduated locally here near the reservation, and as they prepared for college, they were heavily recruited by schools from the state of Montana and rarely received anything from Oregon State schools, which was somewhat disheartening to me as my husband and I were both Oregon State school graduates. And what I found interesting about the recruitment from the schools in Montana was that they were very targeted at them as Native American students and really took an effort to support them both with funding to make up the difference for out-of-state tuition, but also indicated efforts and provided them information about how they would feel welcome at those colleges and universities, and due to the Native American students in attendance, as well as the course offerings at the schools. So my coworker Melissa will speak a little bit to that in a moment. But ultimately, my kids did end up choosing Oregon State universities, and both have graduated from Oregon State and one graduate school from Western. But it still has remained a concern of mine as I sit in my role today that we need more recruitment efforts for our students. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to encourage the Commission to consider that a statewide initiative on recruitment for Native students as part of your strategic roadmap. I also realize that recruitment and funding are not the only things that draw a student to a university. And the other issue is how welcome and how comfortable they feel in course offerings. So I'm going to turn it over to Melissa to talk a little bit about other barriers our students face around that area, as she is our education and career coach.
Mossy Angie, am Nikanee Melissa Polnick. Hello, my name is Melissa Polnick, and like Angie said, I am the Education and Career Coach as well as a member of the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde. So while recruitment is the first step to get students on campus, we have to create college campuses that are inviting to our Native students to make them want to stay there and finish out their degree. This involves things like art, courses, activities that make a student feel welcome on campus. Prior to the testimony today, I was reflecting on my time at Western Oregon University, and I was part of the Multicultural Student Union on campus, and it was a great organization. However, there was tons of Hispanic representation, and I remember not feeling welcome in a group that was supposed to represent me. It was the Multicultural Student Union, but I still didn't feel at home there. And that is a sentiment that lots of the students that I work with have expressed. I was recently helping a student decide where to go for fall term, and he was applying everywhere and he couldn't find a school that had a good fit for him. Then we looked at OSU and they have the Longhouse there, and I remember he said it felt like home, like walking around campus, and he could see himself being a student there and succeeding. And so while building longhouses on campuses, I know may not be feasible, funding, locations, I understand that, but naming buildings in both Chinookwawa and English would be one, pretty simple step to take. Also offering things like powwows and sweats and inviting students to do an invocation before meetings are all small steps that colleges can take to make Native American students feel more included in their campus. I'm currently working on a project that explores all of the majors and minors offered at the 7 Oregon State colleges, and I was really surprised and a little saddened to see that only one of the colleges offers a major in Native American studies. So we would love to see that Native American representation increases on campus to increase student success overall. And with that, we would like to open it up to any questions or comments.
Do you have any questions? Right.
Looking for the microphone, I guess not. I just wanted to commend the 2 speakers that joined us this morning and everyone else, the extended families, and I mean that we are all Oregonians, and I think Oregonians take pride in being from Oregon or in Oregon or recently moved to Oregon. It's a different culture, and I don't know, but I understand the tribal communities and other marginalized communities feel out of place and still do probably. But as Lindsay Capps mentioned, this is a bold, decisive move by the governor, by all of us involved, and we want to make wrong things right. We want to make this truly inclusive. And you being here and us feeling your presence makes us all one community. And so my comment is just thank you. Stay working with us. If there's obstacles, roadblocks, disappointments along the way in the near future, please inform us. Please get in touch with any of us. And we will do our part. I know Lindsay Capps nods in approval as well of that comment. So thank you again.
One of the things that we heard at the Talent Summit this week was how the pipeline from education to workforce is, how clunky that is, or they use the term broken. And my experience of in trying to make sure that tribes have a workforce for social services, for example, is that it's really hard to find people who are educated not only in the profession but in how to work in a tribal community. And so so often even though we send our kids off to school and that they have an opportunity to go to school, when they come back to their community, there's a period of having to relearn or adjust what was learned in institutions of higher education in order to be able to practice effectively at home. My experience of that was to go home to my own reservation after graduate school and fall flat on my face and have elders take me aside to say, who do you think you are? And I had to relearn. Can you comment if you're, because the job that you have is not just connecting students with education, but connecting students with education so that they can come home to do the work that's needed to be done in the community. Angela, can you comment on that, and Melissa as well?
Sure. I think some of the barriers that we have is location, which is nothing new to most tribes. We're located a long ways from housing, and so some of the barriers we're trying to overcome as a tribe is to create, housing opportunities within the reservation so that our families aren't having to commute, our tribal members aren't having to commute from long distances to be able to come back here and work. I think that that's one step that the tribe is trying to take in bridging that. And we're starting that. We're opening up some properties where tribal members will now be able to build a home on that property. So that's kind of new because we've had rental properties before. So taking some step towards that. I've also think that as the education manager, I'm trying to push more working remote so that we can have tribal members in positions out here because they can work more remotely from those locations and don't necessarily have to relocate back to the reservation. I grew up here, so it was coming back home for me. So that was a different. Melissa as well is very close to the community here, so her coming home. But our number of tribal member employees here and graduates has increased a lot over the last few years. We were getting close to 50% tribal member employment within the organization, which is huge for us because for a long time we were probably more around 15-20%. But that is continued work that we do to try to capture those graduates and bring them back here. But as I look at my department of 80, plus employees, and we're a cradle to career program. So we have infants to our college students. We have one college student who's, I think, in her 70s still taking classes. And I look at my program managers and they're all graduates, pretty much of our programs here with bachelor's degrees. So we're having and seeing some really good success in that. And we had quite a few students going to college last year. So things are really pretty good. But for us, I look long term. And as you know, we look at long term. I look at the world after I'm here and what my future generations are going to be impacted. And that's why the recruitment issue tends to be one that still sticks in my mind. Our people have been here since time immemorial in Oregon. We're extremely tied to it, and I would love to see our students stay here and go to school. I have a tremendous amount of pride for being in this state. So I think that's what brought us here today, really, to you.
Thank you, Angela. Any other questions or comments? Well, thank you so much for being with us this morning and for jumping in a little earlier than you expected. I appreciate that.
Of course, thank you for having us.
Thanks. Ben, we have a break scheduled in about 20 minutes, and we have a couple of items on the agenda that we could move up from the afternoon. How do you want to manage our time at the moment?
I would recommend, Mr. Chair, that we move to public testimony now. There may be folks who were expecting, because it's on our agenda for 10:35, to appear at the meeting later, and we can try to accommodate that with an additional round of public testimony if we find out that there were folks who were online now. But I think it's appropriate to hold public testimony before we take any action on program approvals. So my suggestion, Mr. Chair, would be to go to public comment now, public testimony now. Depending on how much there is, we may follow that with action on your administrative rules and move item 12.0 up to follow public testimony. We'll take a break as you see fit.
And the only person currently signed up for public testimony is Dana Richardson. Is Dana with us?
Good morning, Commissioner. I am.
Good morning. Go
Well,
ahead.
you've given me a very difficult act to follow, I'll say that. For the record, my name's Dana Richardson. I work for the presidents of Oregon's public universities. And I listened with interest to the subcommittee discussion yesterday on the tuition criteria. I have to admit, I had kind of flashbacks when Commissioner Goulart talked about the 2017 process, the first time the commission ever considered tuition increase requests. And I think it's safe to say it was chaotic. It was, right? It just like understanding as staff and as commissioners what to base decisions upon was really challenging. So we got through it. Not long after that, Executive Director Kane set up a work group to talk about how we would move through and evaluate tuition increase requests. And Commissioners Cross served on that, Commissioner Probowski, former Commissioners Wise and Roper served on that. We had participants from the Oregon Student Association, a couple of our board trustees, a couple of provosts, a couple of finance VPs. I had the pleasure of participating. And I see Lee smiling. We met a lot. I don't know why it seemed like that group met a lot, but it seemed like we met a lot. And we ultimately recommended the tuition criteria that are before the commission today. Since the criteria were adopted, the commission has employed them, I think, really thoughtfully. I definitely don't think your participation and evaluation of the request is in any way considered a rubber stamp. And I think a lot of that has been due to the criteria. The criteria have also been used by campuses to set up their processes and understand what the appropriate standards are. So I would like to highlight a concern about the discussion yesterday and the proposed removal of the word only from the sentence that reads, "It is expected that barring extraordinary circumstances, these criteria shall constitute the only criteria the commission will employ during the tuition review process." I went back and looked at my notes about the commission discussion when you all adopted those criteria. And my notes indicated the word only was included to provide predictability in the process, particularly for HECC staff, and to avoid last minute criteria being added. At the time, you all discussed that even with the word only included, you could consider additional criteria if there were extraordinary circumstances. So I'm not sharing this concern today because you may be hearing tuition increase requests this cycle, right? That what you may hear from schools this cycle is complete, right? They can't go back and change what they've done. You'll get the information that is available. My concern is for the future and how campuses will set up their tuition setting processes. From my perspective, representing the universities, the retention of the word only is an important assurance that tuition setting processes on the campuses will remain transparent and predictable for all participants. Given that this commission has found sometimes it is appropriate to raise tuition, I think it's important that we understand that there is kind of a right way to do this. And it needs to, be maintained that we know what that right way is. If that can be changed after the process is complete, then no one participating in the campus process can really know if we're meeting the standard that you all are expecting. So I do believe the removal of the word only is a substantive change, and I would request that you all reconsider that change when you get to the agenda item later today. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Dana?
Dana, I just want to thank you for reaching out and expressing your concern, and I thought it was thoughtful. It certainly challenged me to rethink some of the things I expressed yesterday, and I appreciate it. So thank you.
Any other comments or questions? All right. Thank you, Dana.
Thank you.
Dana was the only person that signed up for public testimony, and no additional people come forward since we began a few minutes ago. So I think then we can move on to the consent.
Yeah, let's go ahead and take up the consent. So I sort of slightly misspoke. We'll go ahead and take up the consent agenda under items 6.0 and 7.0. And go from there. Take this one at a time.
And because we have several new members, Ben, could you summarize the process by which the consent items get in front of us?
Yeah, for sure. The commission, one of the commission's responsibilities that is not delegated to staff is to approve or disapprove new degree and certificate programs proposed by community colleges and new degree and certificate programs proposed by universities. Those therefore go through a process. They're submitted to the HECC for staff review. The HECC applies a set of criteria that we've worked previously with the commission on before determining whether to recommend to the commission their approval. If they're on your agenda, it's because we recommend approval. The commission, again, years ago, determined that partly because of the number of these and the nature of these, it was not necessary for the commission typically to have a conversation about each and every one of them, or even a conversation about them in block, and that's why they are called consent items. So the way this works sort of parliamentarily is that consent items are presented to you for a vote and without discussion or deliberation on the items. Any commissioner can request, if there's an item on the consent agenda that you'd like to remove from the consent agenda and therefore have a discussion about before voting, we can do that. But you will ordinarily see these on your agenda as consent items. Staff recommends approval. We don't believe there are issues that need to be discussed. You won't get a presentation on them. You do have materials in your packet, and you are welcome to request the removal of an item, but if not, then we just move forward with essentially straight to a motion and a vote.
And one of the reasons that Ben wanted to make sure we had our public testimony before moving on consent items is that often people will come and give testimony about particular items that are on the consent agenda. And Ben, just a few words about that criteria by which these things are screened.
Yeah, so I won't speak to it adequately, I think, but happy to follow up with any additional details. But the colleges and universities submit these requests to us using a standard form that our offices have created that require the institution to supply basic information about the program, including its relationship to other programs in the state that may, particularly for universities, offer sort of similar degrees or certificates, and the degree to which that college or university has collaborated with other institutions. In the case particularly of the universities where there's a greater risk of sort of competition, we work with the Provost Council of the universities, and we take into account their advice to us. These, before getting to your agenda, the university programs are typically approved by the Provost Council. They've met and looked at each one of these and themselves determine whether they think it should come forward to the commission. So we have, it's different and separate processes for the community colleges and the universities. The review that our staff does is somewhat different for each of the two sectors, but we do require basic information, do require certain kinds of assurances. In the case of the universities, the provosts weigh in, and all of that is collected, and you have in your packets a lot of that information.
I just wanted to emphasize how much work went into us saying yes or no, and that there's a lengthy and I think well-established, well-run process to make sure that by the time it gets to our consent calendar, that a lot of people have vetted it, and I often think about how important one brief act that we do as a commission is to affirm and endorse the work of so many who put effort into getting this before us. I just want to say a word also about the consent items, the length of the consent items you see in the community college agenda. And I think we're seeing part of what was discussed at the Talent Summit, that there is a transformation going on at the community college level with stackable credentials that can be compiled into an eventual degree or that are responsive to particular industries. I see this list that we're approving today, or asked to approve today, as very promising. And I think we're going to see more of this as the work of Future Ready Oregon is unfolding. So I just wanted to say that because I look at the list and I go, wow, look at all these certificates, look at the stackability, and you can see how regionally things are playing out. And the title of our agency is Coordinating Commission. And I think this is a good example of that kind of coordinating that we're responsible. Yes, Senator Devlin.
Mr. Chairman, they did actually do every single one of those consent agenda items. I actually only had questions about one, but I don't have concerns that they were staffs and trying to future. But the thing I wondered about is if anybody ever takes a retrospective look to see if the projections of what the programs will achieve have actually been achieved. Now, that's not saying that institutions shouldn't be making decisions where there is a chance that they won't succeed. But if you want to make decisions only on the basis that you never fail, then you won't accomplish too much. But it would be kind of interesting to see a retrospective look, given how many of them there are, and given my focus. I kind of always think of myself as, like when I think of K-12, I think of my experience as a third grade student. When I think of college, I think of my experience as a college student. And particularly from a consumer standpoint, I want to know that the programs that are offered, credentials, people will actually achieve and need something in the outside world. I want to know that the programs are credible. So I'm wondering if we ever take a retrospective look at these.
I can address that in part. No, really, is the answer. The HECC's formal responsibility for program approval is only at their creation, the time of creation. So when the university or college proposes a new program, it comes to us for approval before it can launch. We have not taken the additional step of attempting to review or evaluate programs that have been previously approved. And I think it's a question that's been raised a number of times. I think for us, it isn't just about the fact that we don't have any formal sort of legislatively assigned responsibility or authority. It is also sort of a staffing and capacity question. But I think it would be a very interesting line of inquiry for this commission to, guide us in leading, and would be happy to follow up with our team and with the commission about what, a useful exercise like that might look like.
Thank you. I remember asking a similar question when I came on to the commission, and I asked, do we approve any retirement of these? And the answer was the same. So we see a lot of things coming into creation, but that retrospective would be important. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Ricard, we can go here in the room, and then Commissioner Lujan Valerio online.
Okay, great. I'm going to try to do it right this time. Basil?
Yes, but if it helps, my mother and my father both pronounce my name differently, so I'm really open to a lot of things. And thank you. I had a similar question, I think, during my orientation about assessing programs after the creation. I'm glad to know that that question is a common one. I have a couple of questions just about the criteria that are used when the HECC is approving these programs. I noticed that there's a 45-mile physical radius around to keep programs from kind of usurping each other's territories. And I'm wondering if that radius is set, or if we're looking at changes just given the change of these kind of hybridized programs that are coming through our online program. And I think, yeah, so, and I guess the other part that I'm curious about, and this might be more of the transfer council's work, but when I see programs that aren't being duplicated, but I see similar programs that are kind of being developed around the state, I'm wondering if there is a way that those programs are meeting similar credentialing criteria to allow for more access points if those students want to certification.
Yeah, I'll do my best with these. Again, probably an inadequate answer, particularly to the second part, your second question, which I think is a really good one, about the extent to which our review of new programs takes into account the transferability question, or the relationship between the new certificate or degree that's proposed and other the continuing certificate or degree pathways in the state. I think that's a really, really good question, and we'll have to follow up on the extent to which we really use that to inform our approvals. To your first question, which is actually specific to universities, so this when the HECC began exercising its authority to approve new university programs, we had to come up with a definition of what constitutes a new university program. I'll give you a couple of examples. If a university that offers a bachelor's degree in economics, decides that it wants to create an online version of that bachelor's degree in economics, we do not, under our rules, consider that a new program. If, however, that university decides that it wants to offer that long-standing bachelor's degree of economics in a different location in Oregon that's more than 45 miles or 50 miles, 45 from its original location, then it comes to the HECC. We call it a new program, and that was a sort of a conversation and negotiation that we had to sort of create this definition. It's a definition that could be modified, but you were right to think that it was designed to attempt to ensure that the commission was able to play this coordinating role, including minimizing or eliminating what the statute calls unnecessary duplication of academic programs at Oregon Public Universities. So that's how the statute asks you, one of the ways it asks you to exercise this program approval authority is to minimize unnecessary duplication, and that's why we came up with this standard that takes into account geography in defining what constitutes a new academic degree program at the university.
Any other questions?
Thanks, Chairman. Really appreciate that question, and I guess I wanted to add that existing programs are not without review. We just don't do it.
Right.
And one of the things I heard yesterday from Dr. Woman from California was the ways in which regional accreditation had been modified to meet things, and certainly regional accreditation is a significant part of which the way existing programs are evaluated on a regular rotation. Also, in many of these programs, they're career technical programs. We also have advisory committees that are required parts of that evaluation process. So it would seem that if we do modify something on the side of continuous evaluation, we would want to think seriously about how it integrates with, matches, duplicates, or conflicts with the program review process that we go through every 7 years with accreditation. So.
Yes, Ricardo.
Thank you, Chair. I do want to piggyback on some of the comments made about how we're evaluating or keeping track of the programs that we are approving through this body for universities and community colleges. And I don't want to put Dana Richardson on the spot, but maybe she has a little bit of an answer on how we, as you know, as a HECC, we don't have the capacity, we don't have the mandate, if you will, to do it. But I'm sure to some degree the universities and community colleges are doing it. And I just would love to see if there's a potential of partnership to be able to do this. I know a lot of institutions, if not all of them, do work closely with industries as well, both locally, regionally, to make sure that all these new programs that they're bringing up to speed can also be well linked to the workforce, to be well linked to the industries. And so there is a true recognition of this new program within that industry, and there could be employability, actionable kind of application of these degrees in the real world outside of academia. And so I am interested in that concept as well, learning a little bit more about how that actually is applied, and you know, especially as we're talking about degrees of bachelor degrees within community colleges, as we're talking about just expanding the realm of multiple degrees within institutions and locations. How is that applying to the local economy and the regional economy? How are the universities interacting with those workforces to make sure that they are well recognized, especially when we're exposing students to so many different options, which is fantastic. And at the same time, we're talking about affordability and accessibility, right? And so I'm just interested. I want to be a sponge in that space, and I want to learn as much as I can from these institutions doing that work.
Well, Commissioner Lujan-Glario, thank you. I think what we will do is call this out as a potential future agenda item. I think we need a lot more discussion than we had time for this morning, but I sure appreciate that everyone has kind of brought this out for conversation. I do think Commissioner Hayman's observation that a lot of this happens by other entities besides the HECC, and we don't really need to take on things that we don't need to do, but to be coordinated with those, I think, is our role. So I'm also particularly interested in, so we've done a lot of work from trying to fix some of the pathways that have grown over the years to be very difficult. And one of the things I think we can really pay attention to is how to make sure that any new programs that we are creating are coordinated. That credit transfer issue may need to look at that in terms of how can we not create new problems that have to be solved later down the road. So thank you for that discussion. And with that, unless there are other questions, I will call for a motion to approve the community college consent items. So moved. Commissioner Rose moved, and Commissioner Hayman second. All in favor of the motion? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Any abstentions? Motion carries. We need a second. We need another motion for the university program approvals. So moved. Commissioner Rowe, this motion.
Second.
Second. Thank you. And thank you. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you. Yes, some of the, I think, some of the most important work that we do that takes, we get to do the very last piece of that work. Shall we, we're right at 10:23, and we have scheduled our break at 10:25, so we give our break now, and Kyle can join us after, and make sure I'm in the right spot.
That sounds good.
Sounds good. All right, well, let's, we have gained a few minutes for our break time, so we will have a break at this moment, and be back in, let's be back at 10:35, just as like it says on our agenda.